Hi, everybody. This is Jim Barry with Mile High Cleaner. Uh, I am going live today to talk about some of the toxins that you may be using that you might be able to eliminate from your life. Uh, we all are exposed to toxins every day in a lot of different ways. And if we've learned anything from COVID, it's about exposure. The less you're exposed, the less likely you're going to have a problem. And that kind of applies to everything in your life. If you have bad toxins around you, an example, you live right next to an oil refinery, downwind of it. Well, they already know that people that work in oil refineries and the downwind area, those people are not going to live as long. It's part of the insurance actuarial tables of how people survive in more toxic areas. And there are places all over the globe that are more toxic than other places over the globe. Uh, if you live near a volcano where there might be sulfur emissions and things like that, you're going to have more problems. Now, those are obvious things, but there are a lot more subtle things that you may not be aware of that might be important for you to think about going ahead and looking at to reduce the amount of toxins in your life. I mean, obviously, there are certain things that are more and more toxic. In the past, we've had things like lye soap. Well, we don't use lye soap anymore. That was a pretty caustic chemical. So it could actually damage your skin and do all kinds of other things. So we got better and better soaps, and we've got, everything all the way up to Dawn, which is now being used to clean up wildlife after an oil spill. If you read the package on Dawn, it says if you drink it by accident, drink a glass of water to dilute it. If you get it in your eyes, splash it with water to dilute it. In the other direction, the cleaners that you use for cannabis, well, typically they're things like isopropyl alcohol. Well, isopropyl alcohol literally says on the package, fumes may be toxic. And it's hard to read on that. It's hard to read at any point because look at how tiny that writing is. So they don't really want you to know fumes may be toxic. They want to keep that as much of a secret as possible. They didn't want to put that on the label. But if they didn't put it on the label and there was a class action lawsuit, then they'd have to pay $9 billion, just like Roundup Weed Killer. Because Roundup Weed Killer was rated as a known or suspected carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. Isopropyl alcohol is rated as a known or suspected carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. So is isopropyl alcohol good for you to clean your bong with? Well, no, it's actually not a cleaner at all. It's a solvent. That means it dissolves. Dissolving is a little more intense than cleaning. If you clean something with dish detergent like Dawn, you have lifted the particles off of the plate or glass or pan or whatever, and now they're rinsed away, but they are still particles of food or grease or whatever it is. But if you dissolve something, that means you break it down to its constituent parts and you're eating it away. I mean, this is much more serious than just cleaning something. So it's like taking a baseball bat to swat a fly. It's kind of a weird analogy, but the truth is isopropyl alcohol is potent. It's so potent that it may be toxic. Why do they say may be toxic or known or suspected carcinogen? Well, that's government speak. Government speak is a way of talking to where you are never actually responsible. The government always leaves themselves a way out. So if somebody in the future comes up and says, well, actually, this does this instead, and it's not what you were saying it was. Well, that way, if they say or suspected, then they can say, oh, well, we didn't really know. We didn't do enough research. So we're still right. But we're taking your information in as well. And they'll incorporate it. And the government is very good at assimilating information. Well, what's some information about isopropyl alcohol? Okay, well, first off, isopropyl alcohol is made from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are the root of virtually all our environmental issues right now. Most of the global warming is from fossil fuels. Most of our trash is because we went from using paper and things that broke down easily to using plastic, which doesn't break down virtually at all. I mean, it takes years and years and years and years and years. So all of the plastic, this is a cute little bit of information. No matter what age you are, every piece of plastic that you have ever seen, touched, held, owned, or even seen from afar is still here on this planet. Every piece of paper virtually is completely broken down. Most of the wood things that you've ever used are completely broken down. They're back into the soil. And because matter can neither be created nor destroyed, they're actually kind of in the same position. The wood broke down into stuff that got used into plants and more trees and stuff like that, and became more wood again. That's kind of the cycle of life. But with plastic, it's sitting there. It's sitting there until it breaks down. And even then, it's going to break down into micro parts that eventually get eaten by wildlife and fish and all the other things. And then we eat those fish and wildlife, and all those micro parts that can never break down are now ingested into our system. We don't know the effects of that. Nobody does, because it's all new. Plastic's only been around 100 years. So what's going to end up happening in the future? Well, as we build up more and more toxins, we create more and more issues for the planet. And some of these, you've heard of global warming and things like that. And that all sounds like it's nothing. But global warming has so many ripple effects that it's outrageous. And some of you might have heard of things, because for the last 20 years or so, there's been a whole big epidemic. I'm from Colorado, and we have a pine tree beetle epidemic. All this is a pine tree beetle that goes into a pine tree, and it eats its little way in. It kills off the pine tree, and it doesn't even finish the pine tree. It goes on to the next one, and kills the next pine tree and the next pine tree. And this is normal part of life. That's actually how the forest regenerates a little bit. But what ends up happening is that the pine tree beetle can't survive very cold. It can survive down to, 15 degrees or whatever it is. It can survive cold, but if it gets too cold, it dies. And in these valleys in Colorado, there have been times where, because of global warming, it didn't get cold enough to kill the pine tree beetle. So instead of having a virtual complete wipeout of the pine tree beetle, you now have, some of them are left, and they now can a lot of them are left, and now they can start chewing on more trees en masse. And instead of starting off with just a few pine tree beetles that might kill off a few trees, most of them survived. And now they're killing off a lot of trees. And in the next year, if they didn't completely kill off, then they reach out to even more trees, to the point where you look at maps of Colorado and you can see areas that are bright green forest of pine trees, and right next to them, massive areas of brown, dead trees. Well, this has a cumulative effect. And if we kill off all our pine trees because of the pine tree beetle not getting cold enough to kill it, then we end up with a bunch of dead trees and less oxygen, more pine tree beetles, and more problems. And that's one species. But there's all kinds of different ones. I mean, in the oceans, which we don't understand everything about how oceans work. So in the oceans, we've seen a large increase in warmth. Well, if you have that increase, and then you have, say, a species that can't live at that warmth, they have to have it much colder. So they're going to move to another area, which completely changes the fishing area and things like that. It's going to have an effect. Well, if it gets warmer and warmer, that particular species, it has the choice of mutating or dying. Now, the whole way things work is normally it's going to mutate, but that's because changes on a global scale usually happen at a super slow rate. You know, you've got an increase of changes that's really like this. And if you look at how the temperatures have been for the last 20,000 years, I mean, 20,000 years ago, we were at we had an ice age, basically. We were coming out of an ice age. And so the temperature was really cool. And then we've gone up, and, 15,000 years ago, it was much warmer. People, expanded out where they were at. They didn't just go around the equator. They started moving around again as the ice receded back. Well, 10,000 years ago, everything's kind of normal. And now, instead of being at a low temperature, we're at closer to where we're at now. And for the last 10,000 years, it's been kind of up and down and doing its thing. And if you look at it in the last 1,000 years, it was actually going back down. We were starting to cool. But then all of a sudden, the industrial age hit. And right there at, say, 1900, just 120 years ago, out of 20,000 years, 120 years, we've gone from this level, slightly down from our average, to way the hell up here. More of a change than we've had ever in the absolute shortest amount of time. And what does this end up doing? Well, it means that there's no transition to mutate a species. So if our warmth had taken several thousand years, the pine tree beetles would slowly adapt, and Mother Nature would kind of make her little corrections to the point where either they introduced Mother Nature introduced a species that would kill the pine tree beetle, or some other event or situation would happen to where, yeah, there might be devastation from the pine tree beetle for a while, but Mother Nature is trying to correct it. Well, here we go throwing in this stuff where we have this increase in temperature that is incredible over a short period of time in the geological time frame. The planet isn't able to make these corrections. It's going, what the hell happened? We just had a massive increase. It took 120 years, but that's only fast for us. For the planet, that was really... or that's only slow for us. For the planet, it was really, really, really fast in geological terms. And here we go ahead, and in this era where it's all industrial and it's the chemical time frame, the chemical era, we have now gone to the point where everything is skewed. We don't have any kind of information on what will end up happening because we're changing things at such a rapid rate. There's no history of it in that entire 20,000 years. Nothing like this has ever happened. We don't have any information to compare it to, so we don't really know what the next thing is going to happen. But almost undoubtedly, it can't be good. I mean, some of it is real obvious in the fact that, well, as we get global warming, the ice is melting. And as that happens, the water level is going to rise. But other things happen because of that. Because of the change in temperatures, different effects happen on tides, jet streams, all the different things that make the planet kind of the way it is. Well, those are changing. And those changes are what end up affecting us. And it does weird things that we're not expecting. And the good example of this is what happened in Texas this last year, where they actually went ahead and had snow. And what was it, 3 degrees of temperature in Texas? And that is because the cold air from the North Pole, basically the jet stream bulged out and created 2 patches that made the jet stream drop down to Texas area. And when that dropped down there, it took with it all the absolutely frigid air. Well, that's a sign of instability, that the planet is changing. It's doing weird wobbly things with the weather. It's having these massive droughts in some areas and these massive floods in other areas that were not the norm for hundreds of years. So we had the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma around the turn of the 20th century, and it devastated people. Well, that's all within this last 100 years, 120 years. And that's the kind of thing that's happening more and more, to where you get some areas that are flooding that have never been flooded. You've got other areas that are turning into deserts. It's because we're poking around on all the different stuff and making things change. And as we make these changes, it has an effect. Are these good changes or bad changes? Well, most of them are bad changes because they're brought about by massive population and the use of chemicals, toxins, combustible items, and fossil fuels, and things like that, which we're using at a prodigious rate. I mean, think about it. You see a oil tanker. One of the biggest vehicles on the planet is an oil tanker. And it holds millions of barrels of oil. And they're shipping these things back and forth all the time. There's hundreds of them. They're pumping oil in pipelines across thousands of miles. So what they've done is they've gone ahead and found the areas that Mother Nature set aside all the toxins. She buried them under the earth or sequestered them off into the side and put them down into places that would have less effect on the earth. We go in and dig them out, pump them out, and spread them around. Well, like I said, we already know that if you live downwind from an oil refinery, you have a shorter lifetime. That's a fact. So what's the right way to go? Well, try and stop using those fossil fuels. To that end, we're seeing companies like Tesla with all electric vehicles. But if you've been paying attention, Ford made the statement that every single vehicle they make will be electric by 2035, I believe. Every vehicle they make. So they're looking at it saying, wow, these fossil fuels are terrible. And you're seeing a lot more of this kind of thing going around. If you've been paying attention, little things like the IKEA commercial where there's a ball of trash heading towards the earth. And one single piece breaks off and plops down. It's a plastic bottle that this little girl goes over, picks up the plastic bottle and throws it into the recycling. And the phrase on it is, it's the little things that matter. Because if we don't keep recycling, if we don't reuse, reduce, and recycle, we're going to be in trouble. We already are in trouble. because we're not doing enough to reuse, reduce, and recycle. We're creating more trash, more toxins, more problems than we're reducing. Well, eventually it's going to catch up with you. It's not going to matter to me. I'm 60. I'll be out of here in 30 years. In 50 years, probably even in the 30 years, by the time I'm ready to step off, this place is going to be much worse. Because right now there's 7 billion people. In another 30 years, there will be 10 billion people. That's almost 50% increase. Do you think the world's going to be able to handle that? I mean, there's maximum occupancy levels for everything, whether that be a restaurant or a planet. You get too many people, you become a virus. You become the problem. And we've seen movies about that recently. If you watch the first Golden Circle, the Golden Circle, no, what is the name of that? Kingsman, the first Kingsman movie, where the megalomaniac said, well, the people on the planet are the virus, and either the planet, Mother Nature, is going to kill off the virus, or the virus is going to kill off the planet. Either way, the virus dies. We're the virus. So you keep seeing more and more people getting involved, like Prince Harry doing a whole big thing on nature and how to reuse, reduce, recycle, make things better. And the more we try to do these things, the better off it will be for future generations. But like I say, I'm 60. This might be the best we're at, and things might go down. But what I'm doing to reuse, reduce, and recycle isn't for me. It will only slightly even affect my grandchildren if I ever have any. But the reality is, this is the direction everything is going. And if we don't do something about it, there's going to be hell to pay in another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations, whatever it may be. I mean, think about it. It's only been 2 lifetimes since the Civil War. 2 full, 90-year-old person. 180 years ago, we were in the Civil War. Shooting muskets. Nowadays, we have intercontinental ballistic missiles and ways to travel to other planets. But we're much worse off for all of our healthy planet living because of all the toxins we've started creating and digging around. And that's the big thing. I mean, if it says on the bottle, fumes may be toxic, well, that's isopropyl alcohol. And if that's what you're using to clean a bong or other kinds of paraphernalia, pipes, chillums, vapes, everything, grow trim scissors in the grow, or surfaces in the grow, or extraction units, or rosin presses, or any of the different things that get that stickiness that is almost impossible to remove. Well, those are the things that are being toxic. I'm sorry, I'm losing my thought here. Anyway, let's talk about cleaning a bong. Because the reality is, if you're pouring isopropyl alcohol, this stuff in here, you're using typically a couple of ounces and shaking it up like a masturbating monkey. And really, is that how you clean anything else? I mean, would you clean your roasting pan by just, soaking it and rinsing it under hot water? Probably not, because that would have chunks still on it. But if you think about it, you use tools and cleaners that are very good, and you physically remove the resin. I mean, if you're just shaking away, if you've ever had those little spots that are left behind after you've used isopropyl alcohol or some other toxic solvent. I mean, there's many of them out there. Some people use nail polish remover and shit like that. Really expensive ways to go compared to isopropyl alcohol, but they're all solvents and toxins and VOCs. If you're using those kinds of things, if it doesn't get every single spot out of there, then you're inhaling something that has been soaked, that chunk of resin has been soaked in isopropyl alcohol, then rinsed out, and then you fill it with water and start smoking out of it. Well, if you have left any of those little spots that have been soaked in ISO, then that means you have ISO in your water. Guarantee it. You may say, no, I rinsed it out completely. Bullshit. I will absolutely say bullshit, because things like this stick around, and never have we found that they just come off easily from just shaking. And if, like I say, if you've ever seen spots and then smoked out of it anyway, you know that this is true. You can't deny it. So you use ISO. It's a known carcinogen. That means it causes cancer. It's a known mutagen, which means it mutates DNA, which kind of is like screwing up the code on a cell to where it doesn't fit in where it's supposed to fit in. It eventually goes floating around your body as a free radical until it attaches onto something, and then it starts growing and is known as a tumor. You've seen that. So in comparison, not in comparison, but it's also a mutagen. So we did carcinogen, causes cancer; mutagen causes free radicals and tumors, and then it's a teratogen, which means it causes fetal alcohol syndrome in pregnant women. So not good stuff. As a matter of fact, this is the New Jersey Department of Health right to know hazardous substance fact sheet on isopropyl alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol, I know it's hard to read. This chemical is on the special health hazard substance list. That scares me. I mean, that kind of scares me automatically. If the government is saying this is on the special health hazard substance list, they're not saying that as a good thing. Not at all. International Agency for Research. There's 8 government agencies that list this as hazardous, including OSHA, EPA, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer. So, doesn't sound so good, but it gets worse. The following chronic long-term health effects can occur at some time after exposure to ISO and can last for months or years. Whew, that's bad. This isn't limited to just ISO, by the way. Many solvents and other petroleum-based chemicals have been shown to cause such damage. So this includes all the other solvents that you could buy over the counter, like Brandy's Black Label or Bing or Formula 420 or 710 or any of those. They're all solvents. They're all VOCs. They all have problems. Effects may include reduced memory and concentration, personality changes, withdrawal, irritability, fatigue, sleep disturbances, reduced coordination, and or effects on the nerves supplying internal organs. May affect liver and kidneys. You ever get caught in that plume where you've been shaking your bong with the ISO in it, and then you pour it out into the sink, and you catch that whiff, and you can't breathe, and your eyes are burning, your nose is burning? Well, that's in parts per million. That's 3, 4, 5,000 parts per million. 2,000 parts per million is immediately dangerous to life and health. So in the green right there, Do not wash into sewer. Can I reiterate that? Do not wash into sewer. That's one sheet, one bit of information compared to most people. This is one bit of information, and there's thousands more out there. ISO it may look like water, but it's not water. You may say, okay, well, it's used in the medical industry, so it's got to be good. Not even close. That medical industry, last time I went in, they bombarded me with x-rays. I know x-rays are not good for me. How do I know? Because they wear lead suits, lead aprons, and stand behind a lead wall so that those x-rays won't bombard them. Because guess what? That is a way to mutate DNA. And that's where you get free radicals from, which is the same as what happens when you use isopropyl alcohol. So the medical industry doesn't do things that are good for you. They do things that you need. So that once a year flu shot where they wiped your arm with a couple of drops of ISO, that was so a germ or bacteria didn't get a free ride directly into your system, bypassing all of your filters and ways of dealing with them. We've got weird filters like nose hairs. That's a filter. We've got mucus, which traps those chunks, and we expectorate them out. We've got, platelets and various other things, an immune system for anything that's bad. But if you got stuff directly into your system, that's going to be much worse because it bypassed all of those things and is now doing its damage directly. Well, that's going to get, that is an important job to clean before you do a flu shot. But that's only 2 drops on a pad. And that is, as a exposure kind of thing, it's pretty minimal. That's not much at all. 2 drops once a year. I think you'll live. How much do you use to clean a bong? Well, you use 2 ounces. 2 ounces is about 1,000 drops. That's 500 times more than what that flu shot is. And you cleaned your bong, what, once a week? Every other week? Once a month? Well, that's pretty gross, but, that's very likely that you would clean it just once a month. Well, if a person cleans once a month in 2 ounces of ISO, that's not 2 drops like your flu shot. That's 1,000 drops every month. So in a year, that's 12,000 drops dumped in liquid form into our environment. That's like going out and taking a cup of gasoline and just tossing it out there every month forever. And everybody that you know that's a cannabis smoker all does it too. Well, that builds up to a lot. And considering there's estimated that 5.8% of the population consumes cannabis on a regular basis, you divide that into the 7 billion people on the planet, and that equates to 435 million. 435 million cannabis consumers. And just if 100 million cleans once a month in that 2 ounces of ISO, that equates to 55,000 gallons per day dumped in our environment. That can't be good. It's dumped in liquid form. So that is literally just exactly like the Gulf oil spill, except Gulf oil spill was eventually stopped and contained. We're doing 55,000 gallons a day every single day just by people cleaning their bongs and pipes. Doesn't even consider the people that are cleaning their grows and their trim scissors or their extraction systems or their rosin presses or anything like that. That's just consumers. And just consumers At 55,000 gallons a day, that's a prodigious amount. And it's only going to get to be more as more people consume cannabis. I don't know if anybody's going to ever see this. I don't know if anybody cares. It certainly seems like they don't. And again, it's not going to matter to me. I'm old. It's not going to matter to a lot of the people that are alive right now. But it's going to make a world of difference to the future. If we can stop using these toxins and solvents and VOCs and hazardous substances, that's what's going to make a difference. Years ago, we were told to reuse, reduce, and recycle. How do you reduce the amount of cleaner that you use, like this, to clean a bong? Well, you use Mile High Cleaner. And Mile High Cleaner, I'm mostly, I don't need to talk about it. You can watch videos on how the product works anytime. I've got plenty of videos out there, so I'm not going to get into how it works or that it works. I mean, I know it works. You should find out too. But the reality is, if you, instead of using 1,000 drops to clean this bong, what if you used 20? Just 20 drops. You reduce your overall exposure of anything would be reduced right away. But what if the cleaner you used was so natural, plant-based, and renewable that you could actually eat the formula? You could eat Mile High Cleaner. Well, that makes it to where toxicity, it's obviously not even on the table. If you can eat it, it's not toxic. Now that's not saying that it could be, bad for the planet, but it's also not bad for the planet. There is always an effect of something. I mean, if you move a rock, you're going to increase erosion. You drive over a road, you've moved those rocks, that road is now going to erode if it's a dirt road, it's going to erode a little easier and along those tracks. And you see that, as you drive along a dirt road, well, there's ruts in there of how that is. Well, that's all part of erosion. So there's always an effect of something, but erosion is pretty minor. The effect of using solvents and fossil fuel-based chemicals, that's major. That has a ripple effect down the line. So I'm trying to express to all of you, anybody who might ever watch this, that there is choices out there. If you choose to use a toxic solvent, a VOC, that's volatile organic compound, something that can damage you and damage the planet, that's going to have an effect. It's your choice. Government made that for you. Hey, you want to use Roundup weed killer? Go ahead. But do know that it does cause cancer. You want to use isopropyl alcohol to clean your bong? Go ahead. But know that it does cause cancer, is a major contributor to ground level ozone, is a major contributor to poor indoor air quality, it causes cancer, mutates DNA, causes fetal infant syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome in the fetuses of pregnant women. Boy, that was hard to get out. It has a lot of effects. Well, the more effects that are out there, the worse this is going to be. The more you use it, the worse it's going to be. Because remember, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be changed. What does that mean for us? Well, isopropyl alcohol is made from fossil fuels. It has about a 21-day half-life, which means it's half as toxic 21 days from now than it is today. As it breaks down into its constituent elements, but those are made from fossil fuels. So as it biodegrades, what's left over is still fossil fuel-based toxins. That's how that works. If you didn't realize that, let's go over to that one just real quick. And this is directly on the EPA website, and it's talking about weed killers and insecticides and stuff like that. But it's mostly talking about highly volatile compounds, or VOCs. And it literally says being biodegradable does not guarantee low toxicity. Any item that is any compound that is created with toxic chemicals, once it's created to biodegrade or break down by the earth, once it biodegrades, if those are toxic chemicals, they're still toxic. It didn't break down to, oh, it's just, carbon and water or whatever. No, it doesn't break down into inert items. It breaks down into the original items that were used to create it. So think about that. Biodegradability is no guarantee of low toxicity. Organic does not mean it is good for you. Isopropyl alcohol is organic. It's not good for you. There are thousands of organic things that are not good for you. As simple as eating bitter almonds. Eat too many, that's cyanide. You're dead. There's thousands of things out there that are really bad for you, that are organic, natural, plant-based. What you're looking for is, yes, check those natural, plant-based, organic. It has to be those, but let's take it to a step farther. What if a cleaner was edible? Now, we're almost there, okay? And I want you to think about this. I talked before about Dawn dishwashing liquid. Well, Dawn dishwashing liquid is what they use to clean the animals after a toxic oil spill. If you read the package, it says, if you accidentally ingest it, just drink a glass of water. That's it. With this one, it says things like, contact your physician, call poison control number immediately, do not induce vomiting. There's all kinds of, I wish I could read this. Fumes may be toxic. If the fumes are toxic, does that mean that touching it isn't? Well, no, it's still toxic because this stuff absorbs through the skin. Literally, you go onto the MSDS online, that's Material Safety Data Sheet online, and read isopropyl alcohol. It says, well, we don't know 100% how this product works, but it is known to be toxic to humans, and it absorbs through the skin. So you should always wear protection like gloves, respirator, and eyewear if you don't have a vent hood for adequate ventilation. You should wear gloves. These are all things that you need to do. A respirator is actually needed if you're using this inside your home. As a matter of fact, it's just dumb to use it inside your home because it is a major contributor to poor indoor air quality, which is 14 times more likely to kill you than ambient air outside. That's The reason why is because it's a solvent in a VOC. Well, solvents dissolve. If you're inhaling the fumes, the reason why your eyes, nose, and throat hurt is because it's trying to dissolve those cells. It's not stopping at your lungs. So if you inhale this stuff, yes, it's going to have real bad implications for you. If you have asthma or COPD or lung issues of any sort, pneumonia, the flu, it doesn't matter. If you're very old and you have these compromised things, you're the one that's probably going to die. If you're very young and you have these tender young lungs, and as a baby, you're crawling on the floor where this stuff settles down to, you're more likely to die. And it has happened. You know, you can say things like, oh, my cannabis has never killed anybody. Your cleaner has. Guarantee you. Why would I lie about that? Do some research, and there is a lot of conflicting research out there. But you got to figure out who to trust. If you've got a MSDS, material safety data sheet, on a product that is a bong cleaner, and it says, yeah, no problem, non-toxic if used properly, and they don't tell you how to use it properly, there's a problem. Because if it's a solvent, you're supposed to be wearing gloves and an apron and eyewear and probably a respirator. Unless you're doing it outside. Or you happen to have an industrial vent hood in your home to evacuate the air. You don't own that, do you? Most people don't. So I'm bitching away again because somebody reacted and said, oh, I just use isopropyl alcohol. It's stupid to use anything else. It's stupid to use isopropyl alcohol. It is really stupid. Do some research. Think about it a little bit more. Because, God dang it, it is not the right way to go. It's a solvent. That means it dissolves. And it isn't stopping at resin. It dissolves anything it can that it comes in contact with. If it kills germs, bacteria, and fungus like it does, how does it do that? It's because it dissolves the cell wall, and then once the protoplasm is exposed instantly, that cell is dead. It's dissolving. It's pretty serious stuff. It doesn't care whether or not it's a bacteria cell wall or a lung cell wall. So if you're using that kind of stuff, it's about exposure. If you are not exposed to the COVID, you are less likely to get COVID. If you're not exposed to carcinogens, toxins, mutagens, you're less likely to have problems from them. So tell me, what else do you use this for? I almost guarantee you that if you use it at all, it's very sparing. It is still has some leftover reactions from people who use it as rubbing alcohol. Why was it used? What is rubbing alcohol? Well, in 1925, Standard Oil, which really points out that this is made from petroleum-based products, Standard Oil introduced isopropyl alcohol as a way to rubbing alcohol as a way to cool patients in a hospital because they didn't have air conditioning back in 1925. So on a hot summer day, they come and pat you down with, in the past it was just water. Well, they used isopropyl alcohol, which is a high evaporant, which really takes away heat very fast. So they use that to cool patients. That was a big thing back then, and a lot of people, oh, wow, try that. It really works great. But they didn't really follow up with how bad it was. Well, they don't use it for that anymore. Obviously, air conditioning came around. But they ended up using it as anesthesia for the veterinary industry. up until they found that it was causing esophageal damage to the dogs and cats, and some of them actually died. So that can't be good. So they stopped using it for that even. Now, a lot of people still say, oh, I'm going to use it on my skin to kill germs and bacteria. And it will do that if you have some sort of topical, like fungus or something like that. But do they use it to debride wounds? Nope. Because debride wounds means to flush it out, and that would be an actual scratch or cut. Flushing it out with ISO doesn't happen. Why is that? Because if it's an open wound, it will end up getting liquid isopropyl alcohol directly into the vein. Okay, that's not good at all. So they recommend don't use it for open wounds or punctures or anything like that. It's more of a topical type of thing to kill off some sort of topical parasite or something. To debride wounds, they use saline solution nowadays. You just spray it on there hard and let it flush it out, and the salt itself will clean things, and you don't end up with raw edges of the wound. So if you had a fine knife wound, an X-Acto blade wound, you use isopropyl alcohol or hydrogen peroxide on either one of those will leave the edges of the wound ragged to where it doesn't want to seal together anymore. That's not good for you either. So you don't use it for what they say to use it for, because still some of these things say, use it for this, that, or the other thing. And it hasn't been used for that kind of stuff in years. But what are we doing when we use it? Well, we're teaching Mother Nature how to get around it. Follow this little train of thought. Years ago, 70, 80 years ago, whatever it was, 100 years ago, they came up with penicillin. Penicillin was the wonder drug. It would fight infection. It'd kill off infectious germs and stuff like that very well. It was a lifesaver. It did a lot of things. But eventually it stopped working. It got less and less and less and less effective. And how did it happen? It's because we're using it so much that Mother Nature figured out how to combat it to where penicillin was no longer effective. And then they went on to amoxicillin and whatever acillins they had to find a new one that would work. And each time they find a new one that works, it works great, and then it becomes less and less effective. And they find a new one, less and less effective, because Mother Nature learns. Well, we've been using isopropyl alcohol to clean our bongs for so honkin' long that Mother Nature has figured out how to combat it. There's actually an article out there about how there are 25,000 cases per year inside hospitals of germs or bacteria that will not die from ISO. It's isopropyl alcohol resistant bacteria. What it is Mother Nature has realized, oh man, it keeps attacking me and breaking down the cell walls and killing my viruses and bacteria and stuff. I'm going to make new bacteria with a thicker, heavier duty cell wall. And now the isopropyl alcohol doesn't kill it. 25,000 cases per year in hospitals, in controlled conditions, where they can use any cleaner they want, and they can't use the most standard for cleaning germs and bacteria. And it's all because we taught nature how to get around it. The more you use it, like penicillin, the less effective eventually it will be. Well, we're seeing that now. But our use of isopropyl alcohol has only increased. If you've tried to find the stuff to clean your bong, you figured out that yeah, it's not available as much because we're using it up even faster. I can't explain how bad that is for you, for the planet, for the future. And like I say, it's not going to affect me because I'm old enough that it is not going to be a problem. This is for the future. This is for the next generations. And considering we've been around here for, 20,000 years, we're looking at not making it another 200. We're not going to make it another 1% longer. That's pretty sad. And I want you all to think about that because this is all about reuse, reduce, and recycle. That's something that came up years ago by the government. They said if we reuse everything that we can, if we reduce as much as we can, and if we recycle everything that we can, we will lessen the effect of what's coming. Do you reuse? I mean, I saw a guy the other day. It was a backflow preventer guy. He would have to sit down and work on backflow preventer plumbing that was typically low to the ground. So he brought a chair with him. What chair did he bring? It was the tiny little stool that comes in one of those play school play kits that are made out of heavy duty plastic. That it was his daughter's play stool and, a little picnic table and stuff like that. So he reused the stool as the thing he would sit on so that he didn't have to kneel on the ground. Well, his daughter is in college now. So 17 years he used this little stool instead of throwing it away. Now that's reuse. Wasn't made for that tool, for that thing. But once his daughter was done with it, it was a choice of giving it to Goodwill, throwing it in the trash, or finding a new purpose for it, the reuse. That's important. If we don't reduce, that's important. Well, now you're seeing all kinds of things about Tesla, all electric cars. Ford, every car will be electric by 2035. All kinds of different things. So it's changing. And that's what we need to do. So that's reuse, reduce the amount of fossil fuels we're using. That was the next thing. And then finally, recycling. Now, if you guys are not recycling, I highly suggest that you do. There are costs to everything. And if we don't include those costs of taking care of the trash that's created in the original purchase, we're going to be swimming in trash. Think about it. I mean, if you're a single person and you recycle, you probably just have a single bag of trash at the end of a week. If you don't recycle, you probably have 2 bags of trash at the end of a week. You put that out in the trash and they come by, pick it up the whole route. Well, think about that. You've got 52 bags of trash in 1 year. You live to 100. That's 5,200 bags of trash. And all the plastic that's in there will be another couple of 100 years before it completely breaks down. That's building up a lot. Now you multiply that by 7 billion people. Right now, you've got enough trash in bags to go around the world several times. And it's only getting worse. And by the year 2050, it'll be 10 billion people. It's not getting better. And it won't get better unless you do something about it. A lot like COVID. If we don't all get the vaccine, then this COVID ain't going anywhere. If we don't all do our part, we're going to drown in trash. We're going to drown in toxins. We're going to kill off more and more species that are part of the checks and balances of the world. We're going to make it warmer so certain species flourish while other ones die off. And it's going to change everything. Change is not bad, but if it happens rapidly, nobody, including Mother Nature, has a way of dealing with it. We're going to be in trouble. Well, I'm not going to be. The future is going to be in trouble. So, thank you very much for your time. I am tired of bitching about this, and I really, really hope people see this.